do not see the death penalty or carrying out the death penalty as an asset for corrections. It is really a far cry from what most corrections professionals are about.
Working as a prosecutor, you wonder, are we really applying the death penalty to the worst of the worst? Or are we applying it to the poorest of the poor?
It's the ultimate penalty. It's a matter of life and death. That makes a capital case profoundly different from any other case.
I'm much more strongly opposed to it than ever because the system, the capital punishment system, doesn't work.
When you look at the amount of money we have to spend, we just put them in prison the rest of their lives. We would save millions and millions of dollars that we spend just for executing.
I didn't turn against the death penalty overnight, but it was gradual. But I wanted to support it because I thought that Republicans, conservatives, that's what you did. And that's not true.
I know that we can do better than the death penalty. It's taking our eye off what we need to be focused on, which is the root causes of violent crime.
I'm fighting against the death penalty because what happened to me has happened to hundreds of people in this country. As long as there's a death penalty, innocent people are going to be executed. Bottom line.
The vast majority of defendants who are sitting on death row were unable to hire their own lawyer at the time of their trial.
We see people who are poor and unable to hire adequate defense, disproportionately affected by the death penalty.
When you think of justice, it ought to be applied across the board. But when you see the death penalty applied to people who live in poverty, who don't have the resources, people who may be struggling with mental health issues, then it affects all of us.
In my experience, every single inmate that I've represented has suffered from a diagnosed mental disorder.
We see geography impacting this system. In the state of Tennessee, nearly 40% of our death row here comes from one county. That's Shelby County. When half of the counties in the state of Tennessee have never even sent anyone to death row.
And we know within the black community that there are a lot of people who have been on death row, who have been wrongly convicted.
If it's biased against racial minorities, if it's biased against the poor, to the extent that it's not administered fairly, then I have a problem with that on constitutional grounds.
I'm opposed to the death penalty because what happens if we make a mistake?
To date, 143 people have been released from death rows across this country when evidence of their innocence came to light. In Tennessee, we've had 4 people who have been wrongfully convicted.
If you look at innocent people that may have been wrongfully convicted, it's hard to say that's justice.
For roughly every 10 executions we've had to release someone because we got it wrong. And those are the people that we figured out in time.
If nothing else, I think that people should be against the death penalty based on the fact that you know it's going to kill innocent people. As long as you have it, it's going to kill innocent people.
Because it's a human institution, mistakes are going to be made. And when you are talking about something like death, like taking a human life, you have to be 100% accurate.
I was wrongly convicted of murder and sentenced to death for a crime in a city that I had never been to. A grocery store owner was killed during an attempted robbery. The crime was committed in 1983 in Memphis, Tennessee. I was born and raised in the city of St. Louis, Missouri, and had never even been in the state of Tennessee until I was actually brought to Memphis in handcuffs and put on trial for this crime 2 years after it happened. On the day the crime happened, we was up with my mom just celebrating her birthday, so that's where I was in St. Louis at the time. It was never explained how and why I became a suspect. When I was arrested and brought to Memphis to stand trial, I didn't believe that I would even be convicted of a trial, even though that I was sitting as a young black male before an all-white jury being accused of killing a white store owner in the South. I still didn't believe that I would be convicted for a crime I ain't committed. They offered me a 25-year sentence, and I refused to take the 25-year sentence because I wasn't going to plead guilty to a crime that I hadn't committed. It took the jury less than 2 hours to come back with this guilty verdict. The same jury was the ones that decided my sentence. It took them even less time to come back with this verdict of, wanting to put me to death. If these attorneys had not been on my case, I would probably not be sitting there right now. I'd probably would have been executed or certainly slated to be executed. It took a lot of good people on my behalf that actually made that work, especially my wife. I sit here despite the system, not because the system actually works. I mean, they wanted to murder me, basically. Yeah. So, yeah, I don't have no doubt about that.
This notion that the death penalty is a deterrent to crime simply is not borne out by the research.
I don't consider the death penalty to be a deterrent to crime, and I don't think there's research that supports that it does.
States that utilize the death penalty with frequency do not have lower murder rates. And in fact, there are states without the death penalty whose murder rates are lower.
Once I found out that it didn't deter crime, that was the last thing I held on to, and once I realized that, then I just couldn't support the death penalty anymore. Opposing the death penalty aligns perfectly with conservative principles. The main tenets of conservatism are pro-life policies, fiscal responsibility, and limited government. The death penalty is inconsistent with each of those. You run a risk of killing innocent people, so it's hard to say it's a pro-life policy. And it's far more expensive than life without parole, so it's not fiscally responsible. Giving the government the power to be able to kill U.S. citizens is not a form of limited government.
We do a disservice to victims and to their families when we promise them that once the death penalty has taken place, that they will feel like they have had an experience of justice.
When this legal process should bring them swift and sure justice, what we see is something that is far from swift and often far from sure.
It's not unusual for the victim family members to be brought into the case multiple times over the course of 10, 20, or 30 years. It just re-traumatizes them each time this comes up.
And these families could be given legal finality much quicker with the alternative sentences as opposed to waiting for 20, 25 years for a sentence that may never even be carried out. The death penalty system costs taxpayers millions more to maintain than a system with life or life without parole as the maximum punishment.
It's so expensive when you go through the whole process of appeals and more appeals and more appeals.
The cost of a capital case on the system is at least 2 or 3 times greater. You have multiple stages of review on direct appeal, state post-conviction, federal habeas litigation, which will take 10, 20, or 30 years. It's millions of dollars per case.
These are dollars that we are not spending to support murder victims' family members on resources for our law enforcement, There are so many things that we need in this state that we know help to actually prevent violent crime. And yet, we spend millions and millions of dollars on a system that in our state has executed 6 people since 1960.
My mother was an extremely outgoing person. She was an extrovert. She never met a stranger. More than anyone else, she was the greatest influence in my life. She had a normal, regular day in retirement of working at a soup kitchen. That was a normal day for her. And she had been at my rectory, and she left there. She was abducted at knife point by an escapee from a mental institution. He stabbed her in the throat, and she died immediately. We began a search. We came upon her car parked in the parking lot of the Union Mission. We opened the trunk and found her there. So we called the police, and they put the yellow tape, and then it became a crime scene. The police kept saying there are no clues. When the man was apprehended, it was a month later. When he was arrested, we spoke against the death penalty, and then later we issued a formal statement to the district attorney asking that they not consider the death penalty. I'm more convinced that we do not need the death penalty after her murder. We said at her funeral, we believe in the miracle of forgiveness. It became a miracle in that it brought us peace, that the person who lives inside of you no longer had to live there because he is forgiven.
The thing that has inspired me to continue to be a part of those who are opposed to the death penalty have been those families who have had loved ones who have been killed, who found in their own spirits that need to forgive. If people can somehow have that inner strength, then it ought to be somehow for those of us to have the faith to find alternatives to the death penalty.
It's asking an awful lot of people to carry out the death penalty law. It is carrying out a state killing. As with any killing of a human being, it's really pins and needles kind of experience. I think it just takes its psychological and physical toll for those who are involved in it.
Public opinion is changing about the death penalty. The death penalty support in this country is at a 40-year low.
Over time, it is effectively going out of use because it doesn't work.
And more people are opposing the death penalty every day, and more states don't have the death penalty.
Never thought the death penalty was an effective way to deal with crime in our society. I don't think it's just. I don't think it's morally right.
The death penalty needs to be abolished. It's not used frequently. It serves no purpose. It drains resources. It is traumatizing to all of the people who participate, including jurors, including judges, including prison personnel, including victim family members, including the defendant's family members, including the lawyers involved. It traumatizes all of them.
Every day I talk to citizens across this state who are saying, I don't think this is the way we ought to go. And that gives me great hope that the day is coming when the death penalty will be repealed in Tennessee and will be repealed across this country.
I've been released, but only after I spent 28 years in prison. and 20 of those on death row. I'm fighting against the death penalty because what happened to me has happened to hundreds of people in this country.
We never even the score. 1,000 deaths would not even the score. The loss is so painful and so devastating. And killing doesn't even the score. It isn't an eye for an eye.